I have some, let's call them suspicions. There's something that says to me that the mutation or the emergence of a new species, that the emergence of the rave and the viability of that emergence is going to be totally dependent on the sophistication and awareness of humans that are going to be replaced by them. I guess one of the few advantages is that rave children will come out of human bodies in the beginning. And I suppose that that will allow for some kind of bond and sense of responsibility. It's obvious to me from everything that I've been able to read, and I've gone very deeply into the research of the relationship between Neanderthals, Cro-Magnon men. It's obvious to me that Neanderthals did not go out of their way to make it easier for Cro-Magnon. That just wasn't in the program. I don't really think that these children can successfully emerge unless they benefit from the awareness and protection and interest of human beings. It has to do with functionality. These children are going to be silent. Think about what that's like. I've been at quite a few birthings, other than even my own children. You know, one of the first things you listen for is the cry of that baby. It's alive. And it's an expression of its life the moment that it wails and cries. These babies are going to come into the world quietly. Quietly. From the moment that they emerge, they're going to spook people. The obstetrician or the midwife that delivers the silent baby and has this rush of old-fashioned retro human fear that there is really something wrong here. What's wrong with this baby? There's instantly something wrong. It's going to be one of the first signals for us. You know, it's one of those things where hopefully by that time, you know, there's a website that is dedicated only to parents who have children who suddenly are born silent. You know, so that they can be properly connected and integrated, and for them to be able to understand what's going on. Not only are these babies going to emerge silent, you know, I don't know how to stress to you what it means to have a human being come into the world, not a human obviously, who's going to be flat. I don't know how you can even, how difficult it is for us to even equate to that. Because even in the examples that I gave earlier, our common drug examples, it's still not the same thing. These are not naturally flat beings. As a matter of fact, they're the complete opposite of being flat. That's why we're trying to flatten them out. It's very different than being naturally flat. It's not human. So you've got these silent, flat babies that suddenly emerge. Now, you know, in those areas of the world where you don't have a great deal of information infrastructure and you don't have a great deal of access, I can't imagine these babies receiving any kind of care that's going to be helpful for them, because they already have a fundamental problem. See, they're designed to participate as an aspect of a larger consciousness. They're designed to participate as an aspect of a larger consciousness. So think about what happens to that silent, flat baby that comes into somebody's life and is isolated from other silent, flat babies. It's not just simply that they're being forced to be alone like their human parents who only understand aloneness, but it's worse than that. It's much worse than that. They're forced to be dysfunctional because they will be dysfunctional, because they cannot function alone. They cannot function in their awareness system alone. They're not meant to. And so the moment that you have these silent, flat babies that are dysfunctional, you know, if there is not good preparation to let people know that these children are coming and this is what it's going to look like, and it's what it's going to look like, then we're not going to be able to help them. You know, the only way that these children are going to become functional is when we bring 3 or more of them together. That's the only moment that they'll begin to function and to begin to function properly. And even in that functioning properly, you know, you put 3 of these babies in a room. I've seen these kinds of rooms, you know, where you have two-way glass, you know, where they've done psychological, psychiatric investigations for years, watching children play and watching them from behind the glass. And I've had this image many times of, you know, this collection of social scientists, and they're there and they're looking through the glass, and there are these 3 silent, flat babies. And it doesn't look like they're doing anything. I mean, it doesn't look like they're doing anything. But oh boy, are they busy. You know, they're busy in their realm that the outside has no access to. And we're not going to be able to build some kind of an instrument that allows us to participate in that. We're not going to be able to put a microphone to the inside of their emotional system. We're not going to have any access to what's going on. We're not going to understand it. You know, all we can do is do the best we can to nourish them and make sure that they're together. But we have no idea what that's going to lead to. Have no idea what their power is in relationship to us. Have no idea what they're processing at that awareness level, regardless of what age they are. And no communicative access between us and them. I mean, none. Without help, I don't imagine that the mutation can take hold. I quite frankly can't see it. I don't see how that's going to work. You know, I think this is one of the final tests of awakeness as a process for humans, is to be able to nurture something that is beyond them. I mean, after all, I watch all these damn science fiction movies where we're always cuddling up to aliens. You know, we got aliens that are going to come out of our loins, and we better cuddle up to them. You know, they represent something that we can't even imagine, but they do represent the completion of the process. You know, this is, we have no idea what oneness is. We only live our aloneness. And these children coming into the world and this emergence of this force in the world, you have to see that from our human perspective, from the way in which we've looked at things, the way in which our modern medicine operates, all of these various things, that it'll be very, very easy to simply see that this is a new problem or an extension of an old problem that's simply there, and, you know, let's do what we can to help these poor children be like us. And, you know, they're never going to be like us, and if we force these children into that kind of conditioning system, we're basically going to kill them off because they don't function properly. They can't. They can't. You know, we have a self-enclosed functioning viability. You know, we don't need anybody else in order to function. We don't need anybody else to get to a point of decision making. These children will not be able to make a decision unless they're operating correctly as penta. Remember, the whole thing about the transformation of the 55th gate is that it will bring an absolute knowing. But it's not a unique absolute knowing. It's not a knowing that arises out of this self-enclosed package. It's closer to the truth in that it is the melding of consciousness into a truth. Their truth and the way in which they experience truth is totally different from the way in which we experience truth. And that says something very obvious to me, that our truth and their truths will not be the same. They just won't. I remember as a kid reading about Sparta, ancient Greece. And they'd have deformed children born, problems. And they'd leave them on the side of a hill to die. Institutions are filled with children that parents can't bear to be near. We're also the most competitive creatures that have ever lived. And we're dearly concerned about our territory. This is our turf, this planet. We own it, we run it, we rule it. Everything obeys what we do. It's our world. And the reality is that human beings coming to an end and something else emerging, I have no idea what that's going to mean in terms of the competitive nature of humanity. Did Neanderthals try to kill Cro-Magnon? We know Cro-Magnons killed Neanderthals. That's obvious. We've seen evidence of that. We have no evidence of Neanderthals attacking Cro-Magnon. I don't know if the rave is going to be protected in the same way. I think in some cases yes, but in most cases no. I think it'll take a very long time for any community of any size of these children to be able to survive. It will take a great deal of energy and care. They're the natural enemy. And they're the natural enemy to the not-self. There's something different. There's something superior. They will operate in a way that we cannot imagine. And so they will know what we cannot know. And they will participate in a consciousness that we have no access to. They will be very different from us. They will be alien because they will not have any need or desire to speak to us. They will not communicate with us in a way in which we understand communication. They will not communicate to us aurically in a way in which we understand auric connection. They will neither amplify nor give off a wave. These are really going to be different. How much I want to stress that. In the early years when I didn't know how quickly this knowledge would move or spread, it was one of my basic concerns. I couldn't imagine how these children could actually emerge. Emerge successfully as a viable mutation. After all, the whole process of mutation and evolution is very cruel. There's all kinds of mutations that have taken place, that take place all the time. Most of them are not viable and don't get to make it. Whether or not this is going to be a viable mutation is something that's really important. It's important that consciousness, because remember, consciousness is constantly being poured out into the totality. Our experiment is an experiment that is experienced by the totality. Whether or not there is the grace, it's about grace. Whether there's the grace to make space for another species on this planet, to nurture it, to nurture something you can't communicate with, to nurture something you cannot understand. And, that's asking a lot of human beings. I think so many of these children will disappear in the beginning. They will not be visible, and we will not know about them. I think the greatest chances for that are going to come from those people who have a long time connection to design, whether it comes through your generation and they end up being your grandchildren or whatever the case may be. That you end up with a line of people that have at least somewhere within their consciousness field an understanding that this is a possibility, this is something that may emerge, this is something to keep an eye open for. For many, many years now, right from the beginning of my teaching, I've been talking about the impact on the emotional system, the emotional transformation, autism, prostate, all of these things, we're going to be able to count these babies coming in. I mean, after all, it's not often that you're going to get a consistent emergence of something new, flat, silent babies. And it is something that will reach the surface at some point. Those that understand what's coming, there will be the opportunity, but the opportunity is an odd one. It's an odd one. If you look at the development of species, yes, human beings are quite interesting. Yes, we've done very well, blah, 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 all of that stuff. But where we fall far behind to many other species, whether it's ants or shrimp or whatever, is in our social capacity, that is our social integration. Obviously, social integration is something for us that's always outside to outside, and we've seen that it is our responsibility in the way in which the program is structured that we've had to go through this process of finding, our unique differentiation. But, the reality is that what you're looking at here is that you're looking at a whole different way in which awareness is processed. It is a whole different way. I think that though the numbers will be visible, there'll be no question about it. I've watched this through my whole process, that the numbers will be visible. And the knee-jerk reaction is going to be that it's a problem, that it's a disease, that there's something wrong. And there is really going to be a struggle. Because you see, these children, once they're recognized, they have to be taken away from their parents. They have to be taken away from their parents. These children have to be together. They have to be together. This idea of all we have to do is feed them. Feed them. Feed them. They don't care if you give them a roof over their heads or not, as long as they're together. They'll work everything else out. There are many things that I know intuitively about them. I can't really talk about because I don't know it mechanically. But it's obvious to me that that kind of awareness can do things we can't. It has a power to manipulate things in a way that we can't imagine. These children need to be taken away from their parents and they need to be brought together. They need to form an awareness unit, and they need to operate out of that awareness unit and mature out of that awareness unit. In the future anyway, this whole business of humanity becoming technically extinct, our ability to be able to reproduce ourselves because we have the intelligence to be able to reproduce life. But the moment that you get into the full-fledged version of that, individual parenting is not a big deal anymore. It's not even the point anymore. As a matter of fact, if you don't go through the experience as male and female in a bond with particularly the female going through her entire chemical relationship to a child within her, to the male bonding oracally through that whole experience, that's what defines the relationship of parent to child. But the moment that the child isn't developing in the womb, the moment that the parents don't have a day-to-day bond, a moment-by-moment bond with that incoming child, that the whole concept of parenting is different anyway. And it's not about various ideas, whether they're old communist ideas or whatever the case may be about, the value of communal upbringing of children, that, you can bring all these children together and raise them. It's a disaster for humans. It's exactly what raves demand. It's exactly what they demand. And the joke, of course, is that you can't raise them. You can watch them grow. But how can you raise them if you can't communicate with them? How can you raise them if you don't understand anything about them? And we won't, We won't. They will not operate in a way that gives us a hook. It's another species. It's like me there with my dog, and I'm trying to teach my dog relativity. And my dog isn't going to have anything to do with that. Every time I even say Einstein, she yawns. This is just not her trip. And here I am desperately trying to teach my dog physics. Oh, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. I can even make my dog, upset because I can teach physics in a nasty voice. And then she thinks I'm punishing her. She thinks physics is nasty. But humans and raves, no difference, eh? Just like me and my dog. Only in this case, we're the dog. I can't imagine what a rave joke smells like, but it must be hilarious when it comes to us. Really hilarious, Because when that consciousness as a whole, through an emotional awareness that we have it's spirit awareness after all, I can imagine their detailed emotional whatevers about their progenitors. What a joke. We came out of that? Really? Thank God I wasn't born human. Don't want to be like that. I hope that I live long enough to see one of these babies, or to know one of these babies has come into the world. I think it's incredible, because I understand where all that's going. It's this magic of shared awareness. It's this magic of losing the ego identity of self and being totally immersed in consciousness. It is the place we move towards. Intellectually we do what we can now. We have our limitations. We are not raves. We are deeply limited in our capacity to be able to reach the other. It's all outside. And the idea that we are really going to have a living mutative force in the world that functions inside, is for me the obvious fulfillment of the whole program, of the whole progression. It sets the stage for the future. It sets the stage for the fundamental reality of what we represent. Is that we are all, this is the whole point of diversification now, to recognize that we are each unique and that we each make a contribution to consciousness, a unique contribution, each of us coming in on our little crosses, bringing our little plan and our little way and our little work, each of us adding to the whole. But how extraordinary it would be to be only conscious of the whole and not your part. And this is the thing to recognize about the ray. They will only identify with their communal awareness. They will not identify with a unique awareness. That's why they're dysfunctional when they're alone. They're really messed up when they're alone. They have no way of operating with awareness. They have no way of finding truth. They have no way of getting to the absolute. And they can't get that from the humans around them. It's not possible. It's just not possible. Sometime over the next 4 or 5 years, I've already started work on a website that will carry as much information as I have on the coming mutation and signals of what rave children will be and how to recognize them, and a way of understanding what can be done for them. It's one of the most important jobs in the future for those human beings that are awake and understand this knowledge, is to recognize that it is a contribution that we're making to the future, and that these children that come into the world need to be nurtured. It might sound obvious to you, and I think it probably does. I don't think you get how much backlash and fear such a transition brings. And it does. Because the emotional system is going to be changed, most human beings will only be able to operate out of the desire level of emotion. There's going to be a lot of fear. And remember that the next cycle is not going to bring investigators. It's not going to bring those that want to know why. It's going to bring this deep concern for the individual life. And, one of the jokes is the fear. Look at the fear. The fear is the 57. Look at the cycle. It's so individual. But everything about the individual is about the acoustic. And everything about being able to deal with fear is about being able to be alert to what one hears. Oh, how frightening it's going to be to have these silent creatures amongst us. We're loquacious, gregarious, loudmouth, verbal gunslingers. All we do is blah, blah, blah. We got 11 gates in the throat. We're nothing but talk. We're nothing but, this is my 10th hour of telling you this stuff. It's just, goes on and on and on. See, the not self for me is very frightening. It's ignorant. It's deeply violent. It's greedy. It's hungry. Doesn't like competition. Doesn't like anyone that has an advantage over it. Hates the hierarchies. Goes on and on and on. Human beings basically are not pleasant creatures. They aren't. Not nice creatures. And they have never, ever, ever, ever been nice to anything in competition with it. Never. The only example, I guess, is the dog. Strange kind of game that humans and dogs have played. And of course, this is all about a change in consciousness. Yes, you've got all kinds of nice people full of light who will say, yes, 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 let's protect them and look after them. But I think that unless there are human beings who are really dedicated and really ready to do something about protecting these children and working to make arrangements for these children, that, again, I don't think their chances are good. I really don't. It's just one of my basic concerns about what human beings are like, what the killer monkey is really like when you threaten the killer monkey. And human beings don't like abnormality. They don't. They don't like the abnormal. They don't. It's offensive to them. The easiest way to develop hatred is just to present difference to the not self. If you're white and you're white not self and there's black not self, right away you've got something to fear. You've got something that can turn into hate. All racism is simply based on difference, fear of the difference. And in the context of humans, we're not all that different. And when you're dealing with humans in relationship to raves, there's really going to be a difference. And here humans are dying off and raves are beginning to flourish or designed to flourish. I'm not a prophet. I'm just a mechanic. I look at the mechanics. The human in me has concerns about the humans out there. I know how many babies are aborted. I know how many female children, when they're born, are killed because their parents want a male. I know how easy it is for human beings to treat life as if it's worthless and simply to trash it. I know how many children are in institutions because their parents can't deal with them. All of these things are just obvious. And we're going to deal with a phenomena that is so radically different than anything we've experienced before, that it is going to bring fear, and fear is going to bring reaction amongst those that are ignorant. The other thing is that unless the scientific foundation of this knowledge and the basis of this knowledge, unless it is really grounded by 2027, it isn't going to carry enough authority to really be able to warn people. We may get, selective collections of these children and find a place where we can bring these children together. But that's the whole point. And, for me, it's interesting simply to look at that as a great challenge for human consciousness. How much grace do we really have? Because that's really something that we're going to see. It's nice to be able to talk about these transformations and to be able to have a fantasy about, the emergence of a new species and how interesting that can be, how extraordinary that can be. There's enough time over the millennium that's still here that most of you, and I know that for certain, most of you will be coming back a few times between now and then. Some of you may come back as one of these children. After all, it's one of the things to recognize this is an extraordinary process that's in front of us. Yet at the same time, you can't get caught in all of that as if to say, yes, all of this is going to happen and it's all going to be very nice and they're going to be, welcomed and embraced and it's all going to have a happy ending and blah, 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 blah. It really isn't going to work like that. Remember the scenario that I've already given you for this century. There's so much chaos at work. Disease, famine, breakdown of fertility. That's a lot of stuff to deal with. The end of the searching, the selfishness of the individual, This is a human thing. And there's the individual with its silent, flat baby saying, be like me, be like me, be like me. And if you can't be like me, I'll deal with you. I know, and I'm not going to tell anybody, you could come up with a test to know what mother is carrying them. All you need to do is get access to the amniotic fluid. And there's a way of finding out whether they're going to be carrying one of these children. But you don't want them to know that. I guarantee you so many of them just wouldn't have any. After all, for most human beings, children are still possession. Children still are considered chattel in most places on this planet. You can beat your child half to death every day, and unless you get serious damage, chances are that the worst thing that's going to happen to you is that some agency will take your kid away from you. It's not like you're going to go to jail. It's not like you're going to be punished for it. It's your property. As long as human beings consider children to be property, we've got a real problem with human beings giving birth to these kinds of beings. This is not property. Won't be. In a country like China now, for every 53 males, there's 47 females. Because ever since they've been able to recognize the sex in the womb, they've been able to increase the number of abortions and be able to eliminate the females. What the hell are they going to do? What kind of logic is that? There's no logic in that. It's really insane. It's really insane. And yet at the same time, that's human beings. The not self is ignorant, is stupid, and it's dangerous. One of the methods in India for getting rid of baby females is to pour scalding hot water down their throat. Newborns. Get rid of them. So we're talking about real freaks coming by comparison. Really different. And if you consider your child your property, and you're going to get a flat, silent one, you want a rebate. You want some kind of let's do this again. And that's really where my real concerns are. My real concern is with the field of ignorance and how the field of ignorance, the vast not self, is going to deal with such a phenomena. Because understand something. I like dogs, but I don't like cats. And it's not that I don't like cats. It's that the whole thing for me about cats is, I have a cat now. And it's a wild cat. Nobody can ever touch it. But the son of a bitch cost me $2 a day. Nobody can touch this creature. Nobody. Tear your face off. And yet it's there in the morning on the roof going, where's my food? Feed me? No, you can't touch me. Just feed me. Don't communicate with me. You're not going to be able to love me. You're not going to be able to get access to me. I'm never going to give you anything that you ever expected from a child, ever. But look after me and feed me. Yeah. Human beings aren't that generous. They really aren't. It's not what they're like. Not only that, but this is another step. We're not going to give you anything that you can use. But you look after us, you feed us, and we're going to end up taking over. I'm not so certain that humans are going to like that deal. Not certain. No question for me about the mechanics. Oh, yeah, that's going to happen, blah, 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 blah. But is that mutation going to be able to hold? How long is it going to take for that mutation to hold? My feeling is that unless there is, and again, I can't know, I have to watch the movie, unless there is an enormous expansion in how this information gets out into the world over the next 25 years, that I doubt whether the next cycle will actually bring viability to this mutation, that it'll take the one that comes afterward. And tomorrow, and we look at what's going to come in the real future. It's really an open question for me. And basically what I want to leave you with in terms of all of this is, in the beginning, people would say to me, I got trouble with all this stuff because it's so deterministic. And it isn't. It's all about mutation. Life is mutation. The fact that we know that mechanically something is going to emerge doesn't guarantee that it's going to be viable. It doesn't. I don't even know if it's supposed to be viable. Do you know what I mean? How are we going to know that? I can only speak from my human perspective. The voice told me it's viable. Well, okay. But that's not my knowing. I don't know. I can't know until I see its viability. Until I see that it's actually been able to emerge and become viable because it's been nurtured by those that it's going to replace. And to nurture something that you cannot communicate with. I got to see that to believe that. I got to see human beings being that altruistic. And the only way I can imagine that is that there's enough people that understand the integrity of this knowledge to recognize that this is something very significant. And even though it's not something for us, it's something for them. I don't know what those 5 babies in a room will be dealing with. But I can tell you that if we ever had a way, and we won't, if we ever had a way of getting inside of that, we'd be overwhelmed with awe. When you think about human intelligence, how amazing human intelligence is. But imagine what it's like to bring together the awareness of 5 beings, and it becomes one awareness from the inside. Not collective agreement on the outside, but one natural awareness on the inside, in which that awareness guides all 5 of them. That all 5 of them are one thing. Are one thing. Hey, that's the future. Not ours. Not ours. But if you're going to be spiritual as a human being in the end, the best thing you can do is save one of these and find it some friends.